Let's first take a look at using Hardiplank siding over traditional wood framing. As with all siding, your new James Hardie siding must be applied over a sound substrate, either braced framing with studs spaced maximum 24 inches on center, or 7/16 inch OSB or plywood sheathing. If you're doing a reside, it is critical to inspect the substrate and framing carefully as you tear off the old siding to make sure it is sound. Remember, your new siding is only as straight as what's behind it, so make sure you start out with a good straight wall. The framing or sheathing may need to be replaced, or if not straight, the wall may have to be shimmed out to provide a straight, clean, finished product. When applying James Hardie siding over traditional frame construction, you must use a weather-resistant barrier in accordance with local building code requirements. It is also essential to incorporate the weather-resistant barrier with penetration and junction flashings so that the water will drain down and to the outside of the wall assembly. We'll talk more about flashings a bit later. Prior to installing Hardiplank or trim, it is always good practice to stage your material near the area to be sided and set up your cutting stations to minimize dust exposure to others on the site. To begin installing, start at the lowest point. A minimum 6-inch clearance between the siding or trim and the finished grade of your structure must be maintained. Never install a James Hardie product in an area that may subject the material to standing water. To ensure a consistent plank angle, a starter strip must be applied first. A 1 1/4 inch strip of Hardiplank always works well. Here we're starting with a trim already in place. However, in certain applications, trim is applied after the siding is installed. This application is considered a trim over installation. All trim applications will be reviewed later in this video. Where wind conditions allow, the preferred nailing method for Hardiplank is blind nailing. Use 11-gauge roofing or 6-penny siding nails to blind nail directly into each stud. Again, refer to the NER 405 for fastening requirements. Keep in mind that staple application is not approved for installing any James Hardie siding. The minimum overlap is 1 1/4 inches from the top for each course. As you can see, the lap conceals the fasteners in the previous course. Blind nails should be placed between 1 and 1 1/8 inches from the top edge of the plank, and at least 3/8 of an inch from the side edge of the plank to ensure a tight application. Never place a fastener less than 3/4 of an inch from the top edge of the plank, as it can result in a loose board. Drive fasteners perpendicular to siding and framing, with fastener heads fitting snug or flush with siding. Do not overdrive nail heads when blind nailing. If this occurs, place another correctly driven nail next to it. Align the next course, and then blind nail again directly into each stud. To make things easier, use a siding gauge to align each course. Be sure to double check your measurements periodically, perhaps every 4 or 5 courses. When two installers are working together, it is vital that their gauges are identical. Even if you're only off 1/4 of an inch on each side, the difference can become greater than 3 inches off by the time you complete your wall. Therefore, it is usually easier to use manufactured calibrated gauges than fabricating them on site. And remember, if you're working with the wood grain patterns, stagger your selections across the top of the pallet so the overall pattern varies as you apply your Hardiplank. Now let's talk about face nailing. Use siding nails or 6-penny corrosion-resistant common nails. Be sure to drive the head of the nail flush and perpendicular with a plank. Whether you're blind nailing or face nailing, planks should be butted together with moderate contact, but not forced tightly together. All butt joints should fall on a stud. Be sure to leave a minimum 1/8 of an inch gap around windows and trim for possible expansion of wood. Caulk all of these joints in accordance with caulk manufacturer's written application instructions. The recommended method for dealing with butt joints is to place a joint flashing behind the joint. A joint flashing provides an extra layer of water protection, as water will be channeled between the planks and away from the wall cavity. You can use the same material that you used for your weather barrier for your joint flashings. Joint flashings should extend 3 inches on both sides of the joint, 3 inches above the plank, and overlap the previous course by 1 inch. However, this does not eliminate the requirement for a weather-resistant barrier. We should also take a moment to talk briefly about flashings and clearances. It is important to have proper flashings in place as they play a critical role in the moisture protection of your wall. At the juncture of the roof and vertical surfaces, flashing and counter flashing should be installed as provided by the roofing manufacturer's instructions. Always maintain a minimum of 2 inches clearance between the roofing and bottom edge of your James Hardie siding. Around windows and doors, flashing should be installed above any trim used for casings. If you're using Hardie panel or Hardie trim around a column, you should allow a minimum of 2 inches clearance between the trim and concrete surface below.